I was sitting in Dr. Allen's office for my routine checkup when the nurse quietly slipped a folded piece of paper into my purse. Her hands were trembling as she whispered, "Don't read this until you get home, Mrs. Johnson, and whatever you do, don't let your family see it." When I finally opened that note 3 hours later, my blood ran cold. In neat handwriting it said, "Your family is poisoning you. The symptoms you described aren't from old age. They're from deliberate arsenic exposure. Trust no one at home." Thanks for joining me today. Before we begin, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what city or country you're watching from. My name is Keisha Johnson, and at 68 years old, I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I'd been through a difficult divorce 20 years ago, dealt with friends who turned their backs when money got tight, and survived the heartbreak of losing my husband Robert to cancer 5 years past. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what I was about to discover about my own children. That Tuesday morning started like any other. As I walked into Dr. Allen's office on Maple Street one October evening, crisp and clean air surrounded me. After all, I'd been coming for my checkups to this medical office for the last 15 years. As I walked into the hospital lobby, I was surprised by how different everything felt today, despite smell of antiseptic. For 6 months, I thought my symptoms were just a sign of aging. Every time I combed my hair, thick clumps were falling out. I had always taken pride in my beautiful hair. I would wake up sick to my stomach most days until around noon. Also, I was so weak that simply climbing the stairs to the upstairs bedroom would have me out of breath and feeling faint. My son Malik had been so concerned about my health. Each morning, he used to come to my home wearing his clean and crisp business attire before moving on to work at the bank. He would always carry with him a piping hot cup of special herbal tea which he had researched online. "Mom," he'd say with such sweetness and worry in his dark eyes, "this is for nausea and to improve your energy. I want you feeling better." My daughter Danielle, a registered nurse herself, had taken charge of organizing all my medications. She'd arrive every Sunday with a weekly pill organizer, carefully sorting my blood pressure medication, my vitamins, and some new supplements she'd ordered online specifically for senior health. "Mama, you know how confused medications can get," she'd say with that sweet smile. "Let me handle this for you. I went to school for this." And Brianna, my daughter-in-law, had become my personal chef over the past few months. She'd show up with homemade meals in glass containers, always warm and delicious. Chicken casseroles, beef stews, vegetable soups that she claimed were packed with nutrients to help me regain my strength. "Miss Keisha," she'd say, using that respectful tone that had always impressed me, "you need to eat more. You're getting too skinny." I'd felt so blessed to have such caring children. While other seniors complained about their families being too busy to check on them, mine seemed to compete over who could take better care of me. It warmed my heart even as my body was failing me. My appointment that Tuesday had the standard tests that Dr. Allen ran: a blood test, blood pressure check, and the regulars about my symptoms. But when Nurse Latoya Davis came into my room to take my final vitals, I sensed something different. We go way back. She's been working at Dr. Allen's office for years, starting in her 20s. Now that she's 35, she's practically my daughter. But today, Latoya kept glancing toward the door nervously. Her usually steady hands seemed to shake slightly as she checked my pulse. When she helped me down from the examination table, she moved closer than usual, and that's when I felt her slip something into my purse. Her whisper was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "Don't read this until you get home, Mrs. Johnson, and whatever you do, don't let your family see it." The drive home felt endless. The folded piece of paper seemed to burn a hole in my purse, sitting there in the passenger seat of my old Honda Civic. Every red light felt like an eternity. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles were pale against my brown skin. When I finally walked through the front door of the 2-story house that Robert and I had bought 40 years ago, I went straight to my bedroom and locked the door. My hands were trembling as I unfolded Latoya's note. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Your family is poisoning you. The symptoms you described aren't from old age. They're from deliberate arsenic exposure. Trust no one at home. As I sat down on the bed where Robert had died, the same bed where we'd often shared laughter and tears, everything crumbled. The special teas, the carefully prepared medications, the homemade meals, all the love and care I had seen turned into something else all of a sudden. My own children were trying to kill me. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I was frightened by a shadow in my room and scared by a creak in the house. I kept rereading Latoya's note as if the words would miraculously change, and this was all some tragic mistake. But deep down, I knew she was right. Everything suddenly made perfect, horrible sense. I awoke in the early hours of the morning, brewed coffee using water I always keep in my closet. While sitting at my kitchen table and watching the sunrise through my lace curtains, I thought like the former insurance investigator I am, but unlike being cynical. 3 decades of investigating fraudulent claims taught me to recognize patterns, gather evidence, and think like the criminals I was trying to catch. The first thing I needed to know was what was happening with my body. I took out a notebook and wrote down everything that had happened to me over the last 6 months. The timeline was chilling. I noticed the hair loss since April, which is when Malik also started to bring me those special herbal teas. Since Danielle started managing my medications, I've been feeling nauseous and weak since May. The extreme fatigue that kept me in bed for days got worse in June, after Brianna started bringing all my food. My hands shook as I wrote down the dates. This wasn't a random illness. This was systematic, deliberate, and coordinated. At exactly 8 o'clock, my landline rang. It was Malik, calling with his usual morning check-in. "Good morning, Mom. How are you feeling today?" His voice carried that familiar note of concern that I'd always found so touching. Now it made my skin crawl. "Oh, you know, baby. Same old aches and pains," I replied, forcing my voice to sound weak and tired. If they thought they were killing me slowly, I needed them to believe their plan was working. "Well, I'm bringing your tea in about an hour. Make sure you drink all of it, okay? You skipped it yesterday, and I worry when you don't get your nutrients." I had skipped it yesterday. I'd poured it down the sink when he wasn't looking, claiming I'd already finished it. Now I understood why he'd seemed agitated when he saw the empty cup. "I'll drink every drop, sweetheart," I lied smoothly. "You take such good care of your old mama." Once I hung up, I felt sick to my stomach. Not any poison, though. The way he casually reminded me to drink all of it, the slight inflection in his voice when I said I might start skipping doses. That was my son, the little boy I rocked to sleep and read bedtime stories to, who I cheered for at every baseball game. How had he become someone who could calculate my death over morning coffee? I had 45 minutes before Malik arrived. I wanted to reach out Latoya, but I couldn't call from the home phone. They might have ways to monitor my calls. Instead, I walked 2 blocks to a payphone outside Murphy's gas station, something I hadn't done in ages. That should throw them off. They'd never expect it. Latoya answered on the second ring. "Keisha? Thank God you called. I've been worried sick all night." "Latoya, I need to know everything. How did you figure this out?" Her voice was tense, professional. "I've worked as a nurse for the past 15 years, Mrs. Johnson. On Monday, during your visit, when you told me what had been happening to you, I made the connection, the hair loss and nausea, the fatigue and metallic taste. Those are classic symptoms of arsenic poisoning. What convinced me was when you said your family became suddenly so attentive with your care. You think they've done this before?" "I think they've been planning this for a long time. Arsenic is almost perfect if you want to kill someone slowly. The symptoms mimic natural aging and chronic illness. Most doctors wouldn't even test for it unless they had reason to be suspicious." I felt cold despite the warm October morning. How long do I have? If you stop ingesting it immediately, your body can recover. But Keisha, you have to be careful. If they realize you know, they might try something more direct. When I got home, Malik was already sitting on my front porch. He had a travel mug in his hands, steam rose from the top. He had a navy suit on and a nice haircut. Also, he had a nice smile. The man who called me his hero in his best man speech is the one who walked me down the aisle at his wedding. "There's my beautiful mama," he said, standing to hug me. "Where were you? I was getting worried." "Just went for a little walk, baby. Doctor says I need more exercise." I accepted his hug, breathing in his familiar cologne, the same scent he'd worn since college. It took every ounce of strength I had not to push him away. "Here's your tea. I made it extra strong today since you missed yesterday's." He handed me the mug with both hands, watching my face carefully. I took a small sip, tasting the bitter herbs underneath the honey sweetener. Delicious. Thank you, sweetheart." He smiled and kissed my forehead. "Drink it all while it's warm, Mom. I'll check the empty cup when I come by after work." After he left, I poured the entire mug down the kitchen sink and ran the disposal. Then I sat at my table and cried for the son I thought I knew, and for the mother I'd apparently failed to be. In a matter of 3 days, I turned into a detective in my house. Each morning, I pretended to drink Malik's tea and secretly poured it into mason jars that I hid in my closet. I would smile my thanks for Brianna's meals, then scrape most of the food into Ziploc bags and freeze it in the back of my basement freezer. When Danielle showed up with my med box every week, I would pretend to take the pills and later put them in an old jewelry box. By Friday, I had enough evidence to fill a small suitcase. But I needed more than just suspicious food and pills. I needed evidence of intention, evidence that this was murder, other than mere contamination. I remembered Malik still had a key to my place and how he had been spending a lot of time in my garage lately and claiming to organize my stuff. Robert's former workshop was back there, loaded with tools and supplies we amassed over 40 years as homeowners. A garage would be a good place to hide anything that needs to be hid. Saturday morning, after Malik left for his weekend golf game, I made my move. I'd seen him go into the garage the day before, staying back there for nearly 20 minutes before coming into the house with dirty hands that he'd washed at my kitchen sink. My heart was pounding as I unlocked the garage door. The familiar smell of motor oil and sawdust filled my nostrils, bringing back memories of Robert tinkering with lawnmowers and building shelves. But today, those memories felt tainted by what I might find. I started with the workbench, methodically searching through every drawer and toolbox, nothing unusual. Then I moved to the storage shelves along the back wall, checking behind paint cans and boxes of Christmas decorations. Still nothing. I was about to give up when I observed the odd arrangement of items on the bottom shelf. Robert would always get things in order, but the rat poison container was slightly ajar, and when I picked it up, it felt nearly empty when I had last checked. It was almost full. My hands trembled as I opened the container. In the inside, instead of blue pellets, which should have been there, I found fine white powder. I wasn't a chemist, but I knew this wasn't just standard rat poison anymore. I took a careful photo of the container with my old digital camera. I made sure to capture the weird contents. Then I saw something worse. There was a digital scale behind the container, the kind you use to weigh things. Robert had never owned anything like that. I was taking a picture of the scale when I heard the sound of a car door slamming in the driveway. Panic shot through me. Malik wasn't supposed to be back for hours. I rushed to put everything back where it was before running into the house, but it wasn't quick enough. "Mom, what are you doing out here?" I turned to find Malik standing in the garage doorway, still wearing his golf clothes, but with a concerned expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, you scared." "Me?" I said, forcing a shaky laugh. "I was just looking for my old gardening gloves. I thought I might plant some bulbs before winter." His gaze moved past me to the workbench area, and I saw his jaw tighten slightly. "Mom, you shouldn't be out here alone. Some of Dad's old chemicals might be dangerous. Why don't you let me handle any garage organizing?" "You're absolutely right, baby. I just got nostalgic, you know? Sometimes I miss feeling useful." He walked over and wrapped his arm around my shoulders, guiding me toward the house. But I felt the tension in his grip, saw how his eyes kept darting back to the workbench area. "How was your golf game? You're back early." "Johnson canceled at the last minute," he said, his voice carefully casual. "I thought I'd come check on you instead." That evening, after Malik left, I was sitting in my living room pretending to watch television when I overheard a phone conversation that confirmed my worst fears. Malik was standing in my kitchen, and he must have thought the sound from the TV would mask his voice. "Yeah, she was in the garage today," he was saying quietly. "I don't think she found anything, but we might need to move faster than planned." "No, she seemed confused, just wandering around looking for gardening stuff. I know what the timeline was, but if she starts getting suspicious..." I strained to hear more, but he'd moved farther away. A few minutes later, he came back into the living room with a forced smile. "Mom, I just talked to Danielle. She's going to start coming by twice a week instead of once to check on you. We're all worried about how weak you've been getting." "That's so sweet of you kids," I managed to say. "I don't know what I'd do without you." But inside, I was screaming. They were accelerating their plan. Whatever timeline they'd originally set for my death, my garage visit had spooked them. I was running out of time. Later that night, after I was certain Malik had gone home, I crept back out to the garage. The scale was gone. The poison container had been moved again, but I'd already gotten the photographs I needed. More importantly, I now understood that my children weren't just slowly poisoning me for convenience or mercy. They were calculating murderers who were tracking my decline and adjusting their methods based on my behavior. This wasn't emotional or impulsive, this was business. And that meant they had a specific reason they needed me dead, probably sooner rather than later. I needed to find out what that reason was, and I needed to find out fast. On that Sunday morning, I woke up with a clear head for the first time in a while. By refusing to drink the poison tea that they offered me, eat the food that they contaminated, nor take the pills that they left by my side, my body is already beginning to recover. My hair stopped falling out. I wasn't feeling sick all the time. I felt like I could think clearly for the first time in half a year. But I knew I was living on borrowed time. The phone call with Malik made it clear that they were getting impatient with their slow kill method. I needed to act fast, and I needed to be smart about it. The first call I made was to my neighbor David Baker, who lives 3 houses down and is a retired police officer. My best friend David is a person of good judgment. He moved to my neighborhood 15 years ago, and we became friends. I trusted him because of his kind heart, and I have been relying on him ever since. Most importantly, he was one of the few people who knew of my background in insurance investigation. "Keisha, you sound different. Better," he said when he answered the phone. "David, I need your help with something, and it's going to sound crazy." I told him everything. The symptoms, the nurse's warning, the evidence I'd found, the overheard conversations. To his credit, David listened without interruption, asking only a few clarifying questions. "Jesus, Keisha, are you absolutely certain about this?" "I have photographs, David. I have samples of the contaminated food and tea. I have recordings." Recordings? I hadn't mentioned this before, but over the past few days, I'd been using Robert's old micro-cassette recorder to capture conversations. The device was so small and outdated that nobody would think to look for it. I've been recording them when they visit. Malik talking about my progress, Brianna discussing my appetite, Danielle monitoring my medication compliance. It's all there, David. They're tracking my decline like a science experiment. There was a long pause. "Keisha, this is attempted murder. We need to involve Detective Ramirez down at the station. I worked with him for years before I retired. He's good people and he'll take this seriously. Can you arrange a meeting? I'll call him right now." 2 hours later, I was sitting in Detective Ramirez's office, surrounded by evidence bags containing the poison tea samples, contaminated food, and the mysterious pills Danielle had been giving me. The detective was a tall, serious man in his 40s with kind eyes and a methodical way of asking questions. "Mrs. Johnson, I have to ask, is there any reason your children might want you dead? Any financial motive?" I'd been dreading this question because I suspected I knew the answer. "Detective, my husband left me well provided for. The house is paid off, worth about $400,000. I have a life insurance policy worth $250,000, with Malik and Danielle as beneficiaries. Plus, my retirement accounts and savings, probably another $100,000. "That's substantial motivation," Detective Ramirez said grimly, "but here's what concerns me. If they're accelerating their timeline, there might be some external pressure we don't know about. A debt, a deadline, something that's making them desperate. That afternoon, Detective Ramirez arranged for attorney Jessica Lee to meet with us. Jessica was a sharp woman in her 30s who specialized in elder abuse cases. Her presence made everything feel more real, more serious. "Mrs. Johnson, we need to be very strategic about how we proceed," Jessica explained. "If we move too quickly, they might destroy evidence or flee. But if we wait too long, they might try a more direct method." "What do you recommend?" "We're going to set a trap. Detective Ramirez will have the house under surveillance starting tomorrow. We'll have officers positioned where they can respond within 30 seconds if needed. And we're going to let your family think their plan is working perfectly." Detective Ramirez leaned forward. "The key is getting them to incriminate themselves on tape. We need clear admissions of intent, discussions of methods, acknowledgement of what they've been doing." "How do we do that?" Jessica smiled for the first time that day. "We're going to throw them a curveball. Tomorrow you're going to call your family and tell them you're feeling much worse. Tell them you want to have a family dinner this Sunday. A final Sunday dinner before you go to the hospital for what you suspect might be your last admission. They'll think they're succeeding faster than expected," Detective Ramirez added. "People get careless when they think they're winning. They'll likely discuss details, maybe even celebrate a little, and we'll capture all of it. What if something goes wrong? What if they realize it's a trap?" "That's why I'll be right outside with backup," Detective Ramirez assured me. "The moment anything seems dangerous, we move in. But Keisha, I need you to understand, this is risky. We're essentially using you as bait." I thought about Robert, about the life we had built, about the dark-haired children I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for. I thought of Latoya Davis, who had put her career on the line. I thought about all the other old people who might be getting abused right now, too scared or confused to say anything. "Detective, I've been bait for the past 6 months. I just didn't know it. At least now, I'm choosing to be." That evening, I made the phone calls. First Malik, then Danielle, then I asked them to invite Brianna. I told them I was feeling weaker than ever, that I was scared, that I wanted one last family dinner together before I had to accept that my body was failing. Their responses were everything the detective had predicted: concern mixed with barely concealed excitement, promises to make it special, assurances that they'd take care of. "Everything. Don't worry about cooking, Mom," Malik had said. "We'll handle all the food. And I'll bring your medications early," Danielle added when I called her. "We want to make sure you're as comfortable as possible." As I hung up from the last call, I realized that in less than a week, this nightmare would be over. Either I'd have justice or I'd be dead, but I wasn't going down without a fight. It was Sunday and the autumn weather was perfect. The air was crisp. The autumn sun lit my dining room. This weather usually fills me with peace. My heart was racing today as I set the table with Robert's good china, which we used for every family occasion for the past 40 years. Detective Ramirez and 2 other officers have placed themselves in unmarked vehicles in my neighborhood. David Baker was in his backyard, where he could hear me if I called out for help. Lawyer Jessica Lee studied it all from a command center they established inside a van located about 2 blocks away. I wore a wire under my Sunday dress. Bus, a tiny device that would capture every word. At exactly 2 o'clock, they arrived together, something they'd never done before. Usually, they came separately throughout the week. But today, Malik, Danielle, and Brianna walked up my front steps like a unified delegation. "Mama, you look so pale," Danielle said, embracing me with what seemed like genuine concern. "How are you feeling?" "Weak, baby girl, so weak. Some days I can barely get out of bed." I let my voice sound frail and tired, but I'm so grateful you're all here. I've been thinking this might be our last Sunday dinner together. I saw them exchange glances, quick, meaningful looks that they thought I wouldn't notice. "Don't talk like that, Mom," Malik said, but his tone was too cheerful, too bright. "You just need to rest more, eat better, and take your medications." Brianna had brought several covered dishes that filled my kitchen with delicious aromas. "Miss Keisha, I made all your favorites: pot roast with gravy, mashed potatoes, green beans, and cornbread, and I brought that herbal supplement tea you love so much." "You're all so good to me," I said, accepting the steaming mug she pressed into my hands. "I don't know what I'd do without you." As we sat down to eat, I made a show of sipping the tea and eating small portions of everything they'd prepared. But I'd learned the art of deception over the past weeks, palming pills, spilling drinks, hiding food in my napkin when they looked away. The conversation was light at first. Malik talked about work at the bank, Danielle shared stories from the hospital, and Brianna discussed her part-time job at the beauty salon, but I could feel the undercurrent of tension, of anticipation. Finally, about halfway through the meal, I decided to test them. "I've been thinking about my will lately," I said casually, cutting into the pot roast. "Robert and I set everything up years ago, but maybe it's time to make some changes." The silence that fell over the table was immediate and electric. Forks stopped moving. Breathing seemed to pause. "What kind of changes, Mom?" Malik asked carefully. "Well, I've been so impressed by Nurse Latoya's kindness to me, and David Baker has been such a good neighbor. I'm thinking about leaving them something substantial. Maybe the house to Latoya and part of my life insurance to David." Brianna's fork clattered against her plate. "Miss Keisha, that's very generous. But don't you think family should come first?" "Of course, sweetheart, but you all have your own lives, your own homes. What would you need with this old place?" This time, the glances they exchanged weren't subtle at all. Danielle leaned forward, her nurse's training making her voice professionally calm. "Mama, are you sure you're thinking clearly? Sometimes illness can affect our judgment." "My judgment is fine, baby. In fact, I'm seeing things more clearly than I have in months." That's when everything changed. The pretense, the caring facade, the loving family act. It all crumbled in an instant. "Mom," Malik said, his voice taking on a harder edge, "you can't just throw away our inheritance on strangers. We've been taking care of you for months." "Taking care of me?" I repeated, letting some steel enter my voice. "Is that what you call it?" "We've been here every single day," Danielle said, her professional mask slipping, "bringing you food, managing your medications, making sure you're comfortable, while you talk about giving our family's money to some nurse and neighbor." "Your family's money?" I stood up slowly, feeling strength flow through me for the first time in months. "This is my money, my house, my life insurance, and it's my choice what to do with it." Brianna was the first to crack completely. "You ungrateful old woman, do you have any idea what we've sacrificed for you? The time, the effort, the planning?" "The planning?" I repeated. "What kind of planning, Brianna?" "She doesn't mean anything by that," Malik said quickly, shooting his wife a warning look. But I pressed on. "No, I'm curious. What kind of planning does it take to care for a sick old woman?" "The kind that involves patience," Danielle snapped, "waiting for nature to take its course, helping things along when necessary." "Helping things along how?" The room was dead silent now. I could see them realizing they'd said too much, but their anger and frustration had overridden their caution. "Mom, you're getting confused again," Malik said, but his voice sounded desperate now. "Maybe you should lie down." "I'm not confused at all. In fact, I know exactly what's been happening." I reached into my purse and pulled out one of the mason jars containing the poison tea. "I know about the arsenic you've been putting in my tea, Malik." His face went white. "I know about the contaminated meals, Brianna." She started to stand, but I continued. "And I know about the fake medications, Danielle. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out eventually?" That's when the dining room exploded into chaos. Malik lunged toward me, shouting that I was crazy, that I was paranoid. Danielle started crying, claiming they were just trying to help me. Brianna began screaming about how I was ruining everything. But above their voices, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Detective Ramirez's voice coming through my front door. "Police! Nobody move!" The look of shock and betrayal on their faces as officers flooded into my dining room was something I'll never forget. These were my children, my family, and they'd spent months systematically trying to murder me for money. As Detective Ramirez read them their rights, Malik looked at me with pure hatred. "You'll regret this, Mom. We're your family. We're all you have. "No, Malik," I replied quietly. "Family doesn't try to kill you, and as it turns out, I have more people who love me than I ever realized." The nightmare was finally over. 6 months later, sitting on my front porch on a pretty spring morning, I watch Ian daffodils that Robert and I planted together 30 years ago. My hair is back and thicker than ever. My energy level is now complete, and doctors say all traces of arsenic have finally left my body. The legal proceedings moved faster than anyone expected. Malik, Danielle, and Brianna all accepted plea deals instead of going to trial because they had been broken down completely during their arrest, as well as confessions recorded and physical evidence. Malik received 12 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. Danielle got 10 years, with the possibility of parole in 7 because she cooperated with prosecutors and provided details about how they'd researched the arsenic dosages. Brianna received 8 years after her attorney argued she'd been pressured into participation by her husband. Detective Ramirez told me that during their interrogations, the full scope of their planning emerged. They'd been discussing my death for over 2 years, ever since Malik's gambling debts had reached nearly $50,000, and Danielle had maxed out her credit cards, trying to maintain a lifestyle she couldn't afford. Brianna had lost her job at the salon 6 months before the poisoning began and was facing eviction. They'd chosen arsenic because Danielle's medical knowledge told them it would be nearly impossible to detect without specific testing. They'd planned to stretch my death out over 8 to 10 months, making it look like a natural decline. The insurance money would pay off their debts, and the house would be sold to fund their fresh start. What haunts me most is how calculated it all was. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. They'd researched methods, practiced their caring performances, and monitored my decline like scientists studying a lab rat. But today, I'm not dwelling on their betrayal. I'm thinking about the new family I've found. Latoya Davis has become like a daughter to me. After warning me about the poisoning, she was fired from Dr. Allen's office for breaching patient confidentiality, but she says it was the easiest decision she ever made. She works at the county hospital now in their elder care unit, so she comes by every Tuesday night for dinner. We prepare food as a team, share jokes, and at times we enjoy the silence. David Baker and I enjoy drinking our morning coffee on the porch with the nicer sunrise view. During the legal proceedings' darkest period of my life, he was there for me. I know Robert would have liked him. Though David never fills the hole of my husband, he does fill a loneliness I never knew I had. Attorney Jessica Lee and I have started working on a project. My spouse and I began the Elder Advocacy Network to assist elderly people in identifying and escaping financial abuse by family members. Jessica takes care of all the legal stuff as I share my story in community centers or senior living or hospitals. The response has been overwhelming. In 6 months, we've helped 43 seniors identify suspicious behavior from family members, and we've prevented at least 8 cases that were heading towards situations like mine. I never imagined that my nightmare would become a way to protect other people. Dr. Allen has become one of our biggest supporters. He's trained his entire staff to recognize the warning signs of elder abuse and has implemented protocols for confidentially helping patients who might be in danger. He told me that Latoya's courage in warning me has changed how his entire practice approaches senior care. I've also reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with over the years. When the story made the local news, people reached out who I hadn't heard from in decades. My address book is fuller now than it's been since Robert died. The house feels different now, too. I've redecorated the dining room completely, replacing the table where that horrible final dinner took place. The kitchen has been renovated from top to bottom. I needed to erase every surface where poisoned food had been prepared. But rather than making the house feel foreign, these changes have made it feel renewed, like it's truly mine again. I won't lie and say I'm not changed by what happened. I'm more cautious about trust now, more aware of people's motivations. But I'm also more grateful for genuine kindness, more appreciative of authentic relationships. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Malik, Danielle, and Brianna in their prison cells. I wonder if they understand what they threw away. Not just their freedom, but the chance to know me as a person, rather than just an inheritance. I wonder if they ever truly loved me, or if I was always just a means to an end in their minds. But those dark thoughts don't linger like they used to. I have too much life to live, too many people to help, too much joy to discover. Next month, Latoya and I are taking a trip to New Orleans, something I've wanted to do since Robert passed, but never had the courage to try alone. David is teaching me to play chess, a game Robert never had patience for. Jessica and I are writing a book about recognizing family financial abuse, hoping to reach people who might not attend our presentations. I'm 69 years old, and in many ways, my life is just beginning. The children I raised are gone, lost to greed and cruelty I still struggle to comprehend. But the family I've chosen, the people who see my value beyond my bank account, who love me for who I am rather than what I can provide, this family is stronger than blood. Did you enjoy the story? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. If you'd like to support my work, please subscribe. Thank you for being here. Your support means the world. See you in the next one.